Hello everybody, I am back with a second video from Nottingham Regionals, and this is now round 5, and this is between Ryan Moorhouse on the left and Tamao Cameron on the right. Now Ryan Moorhouse we saw in the previous video. Tamao Cameron, this is his first time on the stream, maybe it'll be his last, who knows. If you're wondering who's on Tamao's mat, it's my good friend Luke Kirkham, who's also a good friend of Tamao. I'm not entirely sure 100% the reason for the mat, but I do enjoy that people have to kind of sit there staring at Luke's face while they play. I'd like to think just a little bit intimidating. At Wakefield Regionals the previous weekend, Luke used the mat, which was probably a little bit more freaky. This particular week, it's over to Tamao. Now, these two chaps have played each other. They played each other in top 8 of regionals, cities 2 weekends before. Ryan was using a Landorus Bats deck then, and Tamao was using a deck he's playing at the moment. Now, we saw in a previous video that Ryan is using a Darkrai Yveltal Seismitoad deck, seemingly without Garbodor. Tamao is using an Exeggutor deck, which is a deck many of you will be unfamiliar with which many of you will be unfamiliar, I should say, because it's a very unusual deck. It's a deck which I've not seen played by a lot of people. Now, I'm not saying nobody plays it, and it may well be that, you're sitting there watching going, well, hang on a second, I played against one of these in such and such a tournament, or my mate plays this. But it's very, very unusual. It all revolves around Exeggutor and his attack, which does 10 damage and blocks supporters for the following turn. Kind of like Seismitoad, but it blocks supporters, it doesn't block trainers. And it is, shall we say, infuriating. So Tamao starts off, he's got a Virizion active, he plays a Hypnotoxic Laser, and he puts Ryan to sleep, and then he plays a Battle Compressor. Battle Compressor is an amazing card in this particular deck, because the basic of Exeggutor is Execute. And Execute you put in your deck, you put in your discard pile, and it's got propagation to put it into your hand. So Tamao's just discarded 2 Executes, and he can actually just bring them right back into his hand and put them on the bench, like Pokémon Collector for anyone that used to play when that card was around, or Pokémon Fan Club for an extra card, which is what Pokémon Collector was. And this basically allows Tamao to search for these basic Pokémon while doing other things. Now, the other card Tamao put in his discard pile from the first Battle Compressor was Lissandra's Trump card, which makes both players shuffle their discard piles back into their deck. And the reason for this is Tamao runs through his deck incredibly quickly, and then this allows him to play Lissandra's Trump card and just recycle everything. Tamao's deck plays an awful lot of Crushing Hammer, Enhanced Hammer, lasers, etc. And then it basically allows him to just, get those cards and use them again and again and again. Now, he also discards a Mr. Mime and a Dragalge. Oh, and he's got another Battle Compressor in his hand, apparently. He started with 3, and you can see the grin on his face there. And all he's going to discard from that one is a Juniper. So Battle Compressor here not only allows him to get the Execute in the discard pile, and then Propagation, the ability, so that he can put it on his bench, but it also allows him to play a VS Seeker, and bring his supporters back. Although the only supporter he plays in this deck is Professor Juniper. So we see there a Plasma Energy on the Virizion, and then he's benched 2 eggs and he has passed. The reason he's playing Plasma Energy here is because he also plays 1 Genesect, and he's able to use Red Signal, which it acts like his Pokemon catcher in this particular deck. Now, what you also see there, as he evolves up to an Execute, is he's now got 2 energy on his Virizion, and he is able to Emerald Slash, and it looks like that's what he's doing, playing an Emerald Slash onto his Execute. Ryan has absolutely nothing in his hand, and it looks like that's the end of game 1. Because Ryan had absolutely nothing. Now, this is an unusual deck for Tamao, so I'm going to try and fill you in on the deck as we go through. The Virizion there is just to make him immune to lasers and stuff like that. And he plays a Genesect to use the Red Signal ability by attaching a Plasma Energy, which acts like a Lissandra, allowing you to drag one of your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active position. Execute is there to fuel Exeggutor, but like I said, it works incredibly well with Battle Compressor because it essentially searches them out. You discard them, you propagate, you put them on the bench, life is good. Because it's got the ability that allows you to take it out the discard pile and put it into your hand. He also plays a Dragalge line, and Dragalge has an ability which stops your opponent retreating if they are affected by poison. And if you play against Tamao's deck, you will very, very often be poisoned, so it's to stop things like Manectric or Horliture, etc., trying to, retreat into a viable attacker. So really it's an ingenious deck, it's a fantastic deck, and it is a legitimate deck. It looks like the kind of deck that a new player would build for fun. I assure you, I've watched this deck a few times, and hopefully we're going to watch it more on stream as we go through maybe this tournament, maybe others, and hopefully, you'll start to get a bit of a sense of quite how good the deck actually is. You've got your lasers, your crushing hammer, your enhanced hammer, and he uses these trainer cards turn after turn after turn. Although he does play Garbodor. I was right in the previous video where I thought I'd seen a Garbodor. And there is the laser, because there's no Virizion out yet, so that means that Ryan's lasers will take effect as he plays an end straight away. And what Tamao basically does is he runs through his deck, playing his lasers and playing his crushing hammer and his enhanced hammer and all of that good stuff, and then just playing Lissandra's trump card, getting them all back into his deck, and then just recycling them through again. It is an absolutely ingenious deck that I very, very much enjoy watching him play. And I had the privilege of watching his entire Top Cut run to the final of Nottingham Cities, and it really is an interesting deck. Doesn't look like an easy deck to play. Not to not give props to Ryan, of course, but we saw his deck in the previous video. Now he gets the computer search out there, and the challenge for Ryan in this game is getting set up. As I've said, Tamao's deck revolves entirely around Exeggutor, who has an attack which blocks supporter cards. So if Tamao gets set up, Ryan's not going to have any supporter cards. Now, if at the time Ryan is locked from supporters, he's got a couple of Yveltal out with a bunch of energy and he can just run through Exeggutors, he's not going to be worried. But it doesn't matter how many trainer cards you've got in your hand, if you don't have supporters to replenish your hand, you're going to end up losing quite quickly. And that's basically what Tamao's deck does. So we see a laser from Tamao here, and it looks like another Tails there. No, was it a Tails? No, it was a Heads. Or is it? I don't know. I think it's a Tails. He just, for some reason, flipped the float stone around. Now, Tamao there, he's got an Ultra Ball, and he's going to get rid of a VS Seeker and an Exeggutor, which is not what he was going for to get an Execute. Like I said in the previous kind of game, if you will, although it didn't really last very long, Tamao's deck, it's good. It plays from the discard pile. That's what makes Battle Compressor such a good card. The Execute can be brought out of the discard pile and put onto your bench, or he can, get his Junipers in the discard pile and play VS Seeker, etc. What he doesn't want to be doing is discarding cards like Exeggutor and VS Seeker. Now, don't get me wrong, he can play Lissandra's trump card to get them back into his deck later, but that's really not what he wants to be doing. So he gets the Execute on the bench, he gets a Muscle Band, and there we do see a Juniper. So it could be worse. The other really fun thing we see about Execute is that if you've got them in the discard, you can, of course, use them for things like Computer Search and Ultra Ball. So if you've got a couple of Executes in the discard pile, you can actually just use an Ultra Ball without getting rid of anything. You just propagate both Executes, discard them both, Bob is your uncle. So now we see a Battle Compressor, and this is what Tamao was going for. It's not so urgent he gets a Juniper in the discard pile here. He's already got one in the discard pile, and he'd like the rest of them in his deck to draw from. But he does desperately want that Lissandra's trump card in the discard pile, and he wants the Execute in there as well. The other thing which is very good about Tamao's deck is that he's able to run Random Retriever, because he only really wants Juniper. The whole point of the deck, and he's just getting rid of a Battle Compressor there because, why not? Or unless it was the one he played. Either way. So, essentially, he wants to draw into his Juniper, so if he can get his Lissandra's trump card in the discard nice and early, using, say, a Battle Compressor, then that means he can straight away guarantee that he's going to hit a Juniper when he plays a Random Receiver. There is a Computer Search, as I've said, getting rid of 2 Executes, so he managed to discard them with a Battle Compressor, propagate them into his hand, then he discards them using Computer Search, and because they count as a new Pokemon every time they hit the discard pile, that means that Tamao can now propagate them again and put them onto the bench if he wishes. Now there's a Skrelp going on to the bench there, which is the unevolved form of Dragalge. It's not a commonly seen card, so a few people may have forgotten. And the only relevant thing about Skrelp is that it evolves into Dragalge. Ryan's deck, as we saw in the previous video, and we can see here in fact, it plays Floatstone. We also know that it plays Darkrai and it plays Dark Energy. So there's free retreat all over Ryan's deck. What we really don't want, or what Tamao doesn't want, I should say, is Ryan to just be able to free retreat into a new attacker. What Tamao, oh, and there's an escape rope, which means he's going to get a KO, and Tamao's got to put that Execute up, because the only other option is a Skrelp, which I was just in the middle of explaining why it's so useful, and the Execute with an Energy Muscle Band, who's obviously a lot more useful. The good news is Tamao can just propagate it back onto his bench the following turn. The bad news is he can't evolve it, as Ryan plays an N. Now, because the Execute has got such a pitifully low 30 HP, it means that Yveltal's attack here is just going to do 30 damage nice and easily and KO the Execute even without a laser or a muscle band. But Tamao probably isn't very worried at this stage. What Tamao needs is an Exeggutor. If Tamao gets an Exeggutor next turn, he's looking all right. Ryan doesn't have a lot of energy on the field, although he does have a double colourless in hand. Now, if Tamao can get the lock on here, oh, and there's a head ringer onto the Yveltal EX, that is huge. It's now going to take 3 energy attachments to get rolling. And there's another battle compressor from Tamao. What Tamao wants to do is he wants to get his Exeggutor out. He's going to do 30 damage and lock trainers. And 30 damage really isn't very much. He's getting rid of the Mime here because Ryan has nothing that can hit the bench. Although I believe it's a Seismitoad that the head ringer has gone onto. See if Ryan moves his arm there, we can actually see. Yes, it is. So it's, you know, it's going to take him more than just a double colourless energy. And as I've said, Tamao plays hammers. And there's another Juniper. Unfortunately, he had head ringer, but there's a Floatstone on the Yveltal. And what Tamao's trying to do here is basically stop him attacking. And there's a town map, which is useful here because it means he can see his prizes. And it looks like he's got an Exeggutor and an Execute prized. And I think he had to discard one early game, so that brings him down to 2. Hopefully he's going to have one there that he's going to be able to bring out. That's what he really needs here. And what Tamao is going to be looking to do as he propagates an egg onto his bench is he's going to be looking to basically get an Exeggutor up, lock Ryan with supporters, and then hammer off any energy Ryan plays, while poisoning him and stopping him retreating with Dragalge. At which stage, Ryan basically has nothing. There's nothing really he can do at that stage. It's just a case of, well, now you're poisoned, you can't retreat, you can't get any energy in play, and there really is very little you can do at this stage. Unfortunately, he's whiffed the Execute, so that gives Ryan another turn to try and get something going. So it looks like he's got a few energy in hand. No, at least he's got 1. He's going to need that energy. And he's going to have to hope that Tamao doesn't hit Enhanced Hammers or flips Tails on Crushing Hammer. Or that he can use a non-EX Yveltal to really start attaching to the bench. And I don't know if Tamao had a hammer last turn, but it would be maybe prudent not to use it, because if he hammers that energy into the discard pile, then it leaves it open to Ryan to attach an energy. And then he's got 2 energy in play when he uses the attack and attaches the now discarded energy using Yveltal's attack. So he's able to get a Darkrai down. That's going to help his Pokemon have free retreat. And it would be helpful here for Ryan to try and get the Garbodor into play, because it would stop the Executes propagating, which wouldn't be the end of Execute. Like I say, Tamao plays a bunch of... he plays 1 Lysandre's Last Resort and a bunch of VS Seeker. But it means that he's going to... Oh, there's a Max Potion as well. But what it does mean is that, you know, Ryan would be able to force him to draw into the Executes. It would also turn off the ability of Virizion as he gets KO'd, because Virizion at this stage is just, you know, it's giving him immunity to all of this. It would also turn off Dragalge's ability to stop him retreating, and it would turn off Red Signal from Genesect there. So it really is a big thing for Tamao to have those abilities in play. He can win without them just by supporter locking and using his trainers, but it's still good if he can. You know, the abilities help him. Now you'll notice here that he's able to Juniper turn after turn, and it's because he's playing just Juniper, VS Seeker, and Random Receiver. Although I don't think we've seen him play a Random Receiver yet. There's the Dragalge, there's the Exeggutor. Has he got a Muscle Band? That's the card he's really going to be looking for at this stage. And it doesn't look like he does, so he's only doing 10 damage, but that goes up to 40 with the Verbank City Gym. Ryan plays a switch there because, of course, Dragalge was stopping him retreating. And as I've said, it's now up to Ryan to try and do as much damage as he can to get the KO. Now, he's doing 100 damage here, and he's not going to be able to add to that with... he's not going to be able to add to that using laser, of course, because there's a Virizion in play, and Virizion's going to block the effect. Now, he does bring up the... oh, no, it looks like he was able to get the KO there on the Exeggutor. So, here we saw the... I looked away for 1 second, and lots happened. So we've seen the Genesect bring up the Seismitoad, and now the Seismitoad's got an energy, and Tamao is on the back foot a little bit here. He's down by 3 prizes, he doesn't have an Exeggutor out, and crucially, Ryan's getting a bunch of energy on the field. And that's what this game is going to come down to. Now, the reason Ryan's trying to get the Seismitoad up is, like I've said, there is an awful lot of trainer cards in Tamao's deck, from hammers to, you know, the head ringer we see there and all of that. Exeggutor only had 100 HP. That's why it got KO'd by the Yveltal. And the attack's called Blockade, if you're wondering. But, oh, he doesn't have a hammer, which means if Ryan's got a double colourless energy here, he is going to be able to start using Quaking Punch, which is going to turn off all of Tamao's... all of Tamao's trainers, which means he's going to be able to keep Quaking Punching, and this is going to hurt Tamao. Tamao has a trainer-based deck. Now, it doesn't have a terrible Seismitoad matchup. It's not for weakness. It doesn't make a huge difference when you're doing 30 damage a turn. Oh, and we see a Lysandra there to bring up the only execute, and there we have the scoop from Tamao. He couldn't get set up in that game, and that's the danger of playing a deck like Execute or Exeggutor. You're running with 30 HP, you're trying to get your stage 1 going, and then, you know, you're playing a deck which has a huge amount of trainers, and you're using 30 HP basics and 100 HP stage 1s and all of that. If Tamao gets going, and he blocks Ryan's supporters and hammers his energy off and poisons him, Ryan can do nothing about it. But we haven't really seen that so far in this series. We've seen Game 1 where Ryan drew dead, and we've seen Game 2 where Ryan was able to control the game and come out with a fairly comprehensive victory. The question now, and he's going to be going first of course, is whether Tamao is going to be able to, you know, get his deck going and doing what it's supposed to do in this third and deciding game here. You know, we've now seen Ryan win 3 out of 4 games. The only one he didn't win was where he had nothing, so... Clearly Ryan's doing alright for himself in this round 5 matchup from Nottingham Regionals. So, like I've said, Tamao here, he just needs to get set up. He needs to get rid of Ryan's energy, and then he's going to be alright. He wants to hit his head ringers nice and early and hope Ryan doesn't have item cards. Ryan can benefit from Seismitoad here, but he needs to get the Seismitoad up nice and early, and he's still not going to be doing a huge amount of damage. One thing about Exeggutor is he resists water. So Seismitoad, without a muscle band, is 10-hit KOing Exeggutor. With a muscle band, he's 4-hit KOing Exeggutor, assuming Tamao has a Virizion down to block the poison damage. So, you know, the Seismitoad is really not a very good attacker against Exeggutor. Yeah, it turns off all of Tamao's trainers, and that's a bonus in that respect, but it's not really much as an attacker. So Ryan ends up in a kind of this weird situation where, yes, okay, he can block all of these trainers, and that's well and good, but he's not doing very much damage and, you know, getting himself much closer to actually winning, and that's a bit of a problem. Now, we've seen Tamao mulligan once, and it looks like a second mulligan. And so Ryan's going to start with 2 extra cards, and Tamao plays no ends, as Ryan is almost certainly aware at this stage. So, and we see there are 3 random receiver in fact in that hand. So we, you know, I'm not lying about those random receivers. So Ryan is going to have an extra 2 cards, and this is going to help him. What he really wants to be doing is I mean, I suppose his best bet here is maybe to, start off with the Seismitoad, try and get the Garbodor out to block the Virizion so he can get some easy KOs with lasers, but then have Yveltal EXs waiting. If he can have Yveltal EXs with enough energy onto one-hit KO Exeggutors, he can run through them nice and quickly. Now, Tamao has got hammers, which is why Ryan would really want to set up behind a Seismitoad. But this is all kind of lots of, ifs, buts and maybes and all of that. The other option for Ryan, of course, is to have the Yveltal going, doing 30 or 50 damage, and as Tamao plays a Battle Compressor on turn 1 for 2 executes and a Lissandra's trump card, which is exactly what he wants. They are the free cards he most wants in the discard on turn 1. And if Ryan can set up behind that Yveltal, it essentially neutralises Tamao's hammers. Tamao hammers an energy off, Ryan reattaches it using Yveltal. And then hopefully he can build up some Yveltal EXs on the bench so that he can KO the Exeggutor. Now, I'm not as good a player as Ryan. I would love to say that I am, but it's fairly evident that I'm not. But they are the two things that I would try against Tamao's deck. What Ryan can't do is just play the ordinary Yveltal. I'm just going to go and attack and put a bunch of energy on, because your energy is going to get hammered off, you're going to end up poisoned and unable to retreat, and Exeggutor is going to lock you out of supporters. You need to be essentially setting yourself up here to, and you see there Tamao's playing down a Jirachi using Stardust Song to grab, shockingly, the only other supporter he plays, a Juniper. Ryan's going to need to play some kind of control game to slow the game down while he builds up attackers to run through the Exeggutors. If he just plays it like a regular game, he is going to lose. And that's one of the advantages that you have playing, and it's got to be good, but playing an unusual deck like, this Exeggutor deck, if you play it right, and if you've got a good deck, you can end up in a situation where your opponent doesn't really know what to do, and then they approach the game in the usual way and end up finding themselves mullered, if you will. I saw an excellent game between Tamao and a Fairy player recently, where the Fairies player just had nothing they could do. And they lost a best-of-3 series incredibly quickly. So actually in a top cut game, because they were out of supporters, and even though they were trying to use Xerneas to get energy on the board, Tamao was just Lissandring up and poisoning and getting rid of all the energy. So it's going to be difficult if he gets set up. But he didn't in the previous game, so we shall see. So we see Tamao there has got the Genesect active. He can act. It's not the best way to use Genesect in every deck, but he can actually act as a nice little damage sponge. He doesn't want his Executes dying because, as we've seen, he needs to stream Exeggutor to win. And he certainly doesn't want to put a 90 HP EX that gives up 2 prizes into the active, so he can leave Genesect there as a bit of a damage sponge, take a couple of hits, especially from something like a baby Yveltal that's only doing 30 damage per turn. And it's far from ideal, don't get me wrong, but it's, it helps. Now we do see a laser flip there, and it was a Tails, so Tamao's just going to need an energy to retreat that next turn. The key here is that Tamao doesn't have an energy on the Genesect, and he doesn't have an energy on either of the Execute, and I don't know if he plays Switch or not. If he doesn't, he's going to end up in trouble fairly quickly, because he cannot attach 2 energy this game, unlike some people I know who try that. So, and then we see a Battle Compressor there coming out from Tamao again, and he's getting the rest of his Executes in the discard pile, and in a deck like this, why wouldn't you? Worst case scenario, you leave them in the discard pile, and just use them to Ultra Ball. Now you'll also see there that Tamao's getting rid of a Battle Compressor and a Verbank City Gym. Tamao is an incredibly strong player, frequent Worlds competitor, has Top Cut Worlds, etc. And the thing you see about Tamao is that everything's very deliberate. The reason he got rid of a Battle Compressor, he has discarded all the cards he needs to. He's gotten rid of all his Executes, he's got the Trump card in the discard pile, and he has got a a Juniper in the discard pile that he can use to VS Seeker for, and he's now just getting a Juniper for his next turn. And we see hammers and stuff there to prove that he does actually play them. And he's also discarding a Verbank City Gym, and the reason, there's a Juniper, and the reason very simply is because he doesn't really want, he doesn't need his Verbank City Gym. Ryan's got a Verbank City Gym out. So by getting rid of those 2 cards, Tamao is filling his deck, and he's making sure that he's less likely to draw into cards he doesn't want, meaning that he is conversely more likely to draw into the cards that he does want and he is going to use. It's a very good play from a very good player. Now, the reason he puts the Execute active there, I'm assuming, is to basically, it's a trade-off. He's giving Ryan a prize, but only 1 out of 6. And he's essentially saying, okay, Ryan, you get a prize, and I get to attack next turn. Now, Ryan may well want to try and Lysandre that Genesect back up again. But, this way, Ryan's going to knock out the Execute, fine, but then Tamao's going to have a muscle-banded Execute that he can evolve and put an energy on the following turn. If Ryan were to pop an energy onto the Execute and leave the Genesect active, then Ryan could have just Lysandre'd up and killed the Execute with the energy on, and then Tamao's lost an energy, as well. So, as well as, the Execute and all of that. So the way he's done it here, yeah, Ryan can Lysandre up the Genesect again, I suppose, but it's probably not going to happen. So here Tamao is giving up 1 prize out of 6, so that he can get going next turn. And it's not a huge thing, Tamao's playing an Exeggutor deck. He knows that this kind of stuff is going to happen. It's really not a problem for him. He knows that he's going to end up in a situation where he's going to lose some prizes. But this deck isn't really made to go 1 for 1. This deck is made to get set up and stop you playing. It's a kind of deck that can make big comebacks because essentially, once it gets going, it tries to take you out of the game. It wants to make you sit there with no energy on the board, poisoned. And that's what it's really going for. So we do see the KO from Ryan. He goes 1 prize up. We see a startling Megaphone here. We see an energy on the Execute. It would be lovely if he had some Headringers in hand right about now. What Tamao really wants here is he wants Headringers, he wants Crushing Hammers, and most importantly of all, he wants an Exeggutor. That's what he really is looking for here. Now he's also potentially going to be able to get a KO if he can get an attack off this turn. There is the Juniper. And he really needs that. We haven't actually seen really an Exeggutor, except for maybe in the first game, right at the beginning. I don't know if we even saw an Exeggutor in the first game attacking. Regardless, that's what he really needs here. Now, we see a town map, and there is 2... Ooh, there's 2 Crushing Hammer, and there's 2 Headringer in the discard pile. That is, I think, far from ideal is the way to put it. Now, he does have an Ultra Ball there. He gets rid of an Execute, which he just propagated up anyway, and a Mr. Mime, and here we go. Now, another thing that Tamao's doing really cleverly here, he's not just filling his bench full of Executes, he's leaving them in the discard pile. He's got an Exeggutor up and running. He's got an Execute on the bench. Ryan can only KO 1 of them. If he KOs the Exeggutor, Tamao can evolve it and bench an Execute next turn. If Ryan KOs the Execute, then Tamao's got an Exeggutor and he can put a new Execute down next turn. By keeping an Exeggutor in the discard pile, it allows him to help with his discards. And it looks like he's going to go for a Headringer there. The problem is that that's really, it's basically saying to Ryan, you'd better have a Muscle Band in hand. And if you do, for the love of all that is good and holy, attach it, 'cause I'm going to Headringer you. So, by having that Execute in the discard pile, it helps with his discards. Now, we do see a Garbodor coming out there, which is very interesting, and we see a KO on the Exeggutor. Now, here is the argument against Tamao you leaving an Execute in a discard pile. Because by leaving an Execute in the discard, pile, he's now lost the ability to propagate with the Garbodor. Now he's already used his startling Megaphone with a deck that recycles itself so often. You would imagine that he only plays 1 startling Megaphone because he can just reuse it kind of turn after turn using Lysandre's trump card. So here, he's not able to get his abilities back, and it does look like he's in trouble here. Ryan, that Headring is not doing a huge amount. He needs 2 energy in order to use And it's looking bad here. He needs 2 energy in order to do the in order to do the X-Ball attack. He needs 2 energy. He's got 3 energy on there. He's now doing 80 damage with an Exeggutor with an energy on. He's doing 100 damage. So Tamao here, he's going to rely on lasers and maybe hammers if he can find them. And there's a hammer. And it is a Tails. And this is looking quite bad at this stage now. This looks like another game he's not been able to set up. It's not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination. He can still hit heads on a laser. But Ryan is, with 1 energy, taking 2 prizes here. He's got his... And there we are. He's doing 100 damage with that. He's got his supporter cards back. He's going down to 1 prize. Tamao doesn't have an Execute on the bench, so there is going to be no Exeggutor next turn. And this is one of the big downsides we see of decks like Exeggutor. If you don't get set up, a good deck like Yveltal can really run through you. Not only that, but we're seeing the real benefits of Yveltal. And the reason why good players like Ryan often go to a deck like Yveltal, because it really... And it looks like that's game here. And there's enough energy and he's got the game. Yveltal gives you enough options that you can, you can go the trainer lock with Seismitoad, or you can go, hyper aggressive with Yveltal. And it's unfortunate here, but we saw 1 game where Ryan didn't draw anything and 2 games where Tamao didn't set up. But even though Tamao didn't set up in either game, I think it was very interesting here to see the kind of cat and mouse between the two. To see Ryan, and make no mistake, a lesser player may well have ended up in a situation where Tamao was set up. You saw there that the decisions Ryan made really allowed him to make sure he had the right attackers to, come out and do what he needed to do. So unfortunately a loss for Tamao there, but as we're in round 5, both players, I believe this is the top table, so both players doing well, and with only 2 rounds to go, is a very good chance we'll see both of these chaps again in the Top Cup. Make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, make sure you leave a nice little comment below, point out anything I got wrong, because, this isn't all that easy. Be nice. Chance we'll see both of them. Chance we'll see both of them. These chaps again. These chaps again.